Watch the football.
Hello and welcome again to the winners for the first half of the Easter split round in VFL football. And big crowds turned out.
Hey man, Drew, still reliving the 70s I see. Come along with me, put on your flats, put on your high heel shoes, get those sideburns back on, big hair, come along with me, the Marngrook 70s Spectacular! Sensational 70s show. We've got Wayne Arndt, Peter McKenna, Drew Morton, Will Preview, round 3, Marngrook 70s Spectacular House Band with Wilbur Wild and Jojo Zip and band. How about a little bit more 70s, Willie and Joe? Some groovy music. Great to have you back tonight with us.
Thanks, Ruth.
That's why Mum
it's
thanks,
lovely
mate.
to be here. A little bit like Luigi the Unbelievable. Really good.
What about Thorpe? He looks like the Milky Bug.
Wayne, you're responsible for one of the most famous sort of grand final incidents that's happened in the history of the game. Now, people probably talk to you about it all the time, but what was you thinking when you kicked the football? Was you intending to kick it, then chase it once you miskicked it down the ground? What was your intention, really?
Well, the intention was Kenny's shoulder, and I saw Kenny out of the left side of the left shoulder, and Kenny was streaming straight towards goal, and I thought it'd be pretty easy to pick the footy up, swing it over the left shoulder, and Kenny runs into an open goal, and as we can see by that, it was a pretty ordinary kick, and
It was out.
I couldn't see, the hair was in my eyes for the first time.
Now, it looked to me like you crashed through the fence and ended up 5 rows back with the Collingwood supporters. Was that ball out or not, for the record?
Close. If I give a decision now, it's all finished.
'Cause I wanna rock your gypsy soul way back where the days of old. Yeah, together we would roll to the misty. Rock.
Tonight, brother, we're going to pay tribute to you for your incredible contribution, not only to football, but just to sports coverage in general. We're going to take a look back in time. Here's Drew Morford, folks.
Hello and welcome to the winners. Well, it's on again next week, Hawthorn and Collingwood once more. Tonight, the first of our semi-finals, with the tournament having been reduced to the top 4 players after 12 weeks of elimination matches. They together formed a great fast bowling pair. So I'll just keep rattling on here until they reckon they got enough to use as a cutaway.
Well done, Drew. And look, mate, I'm sure there's plenty of years still left in the old dog yet, so to speak.
That is trawling through the archives. Yeah.
Now, can I ask you, out of all the years that you've been doing AFL, VFL football, what's your most memorable moment?
Well, the first season, the drawn grand final was one, but I have to say, it's not quite the 70s, but just into the 80s, when the Cracker brothers turned up in Melbourne from Western Australia, Jim and Phil. Doug Hayward and I called round 2. It was at Arden Street against North Melbourne, and they just had this telepathy. One knew where the other one was. They'd tap it over their head. I think one kicked 4 goals that day and the other one kicked 3. It was just phenomenal. Look at what Jim did then to Phil to run onto it. It was something the like of which we had never seen before. They took the competition by storm.
Yeah, such a huge impact. Such a huge impact. And I don't think any Indigenous players since have made as big an impact, with all due respect to some of the champions that have played in the modern game. I don't think any Indigenous players ever made as big an impact than the Cracker brothers.
Well, the fact that they came together and they seemed to be connected by an invisible rope.
The 70s, eh? What a time it was. Now, this is real fashion, isn't it?
Now, Graham, you know, when you won the Brownlow medal, you probably talked more about the suit that you're wearing that night. I know you've spoke about it many, many times, but I heard it wasn't probably the suit that you really wanted to wear. It was more or less the one that you got on now.
Not quite the one I've got on now. A plain blue suit was what I actually had ordered at this place, but if you're above 6'2" in those days, size was a real problem. And being a young fellow, I didn't bother to drop back and pick up the suit until a couple of hours before the Brownlow was due to be on. So I've arrived and the guy said, look, we've had a bit of a problem, but don't worry, we've got you a suit. So they pulled out the brown number and I thought, oh, Jesus. And I thought, well, the Southern Cross is a pretty dark place. No one's going to take any notice. And that happened to be the year. So for 35 years, I've been dubbed the guy with no fashion sense.
Graham, look, great to see you. One thing I noticed in your career, you had a beautiful mark, and I reckon you could take marks all day. But anyway, you were actually recruited by Richmond from a country town called Charlton.
Yes, that's correct.
And you actually made your debut in 1973 and you kicked 6 goals. You remember that?
Yes, very well.
Who
Like
discovered
it was
you?
yesterday.
He does.
Who discovered you, Graham?
There's a guy called Leo Rush who was a scout for Richmond in those days, and I remember the meeting very well because in a small country town like that, you knew when the scouts are in town, and it was a semi-final, and I'd played pretty well and kicked 4 goals and saw Leo coming through the door, and he's getting closer and closer, and he actually stood on my foot and fell in my lap and breathed all over me. He'd been on the booze all day, so his recommendation mightn't have been as accurate as it could have been.
What was your first impressions from Charlton to the famous Punt Road?
Well,
Big difference.
coming down as a 15-year-old and walking in and in a change room, you've got Ian Stewart, Kevin Bartlett, Kevin Sheedy, Royce Hart. These are guys that the year before I'd been watching on television. They were just legends of the game, and it was a winning time for the Tigers, and just a culture that was just such a huge shock from a country boy that wasn't that fond of training in those days.
Peter McKenna is one of the greatest full forwards of all times, Gilbert, and I sent Layla out this week to catch up with the goal-kicking legend and find out what he's up to these days.
He's been a TV star, a rock star and a driving force as Collingwood's best ever full forward. And today, Peter McKenna is still a driving force, just of a different kind. Oh, and here he is now, right on time. G'day, Peter. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Layla. Lovely to see you again.
Love your flash car. So what are you doing nowadays?
Yes, well, it's a government car, and I drive the President of the Upper House of Victoria, Bruce Atkinson.
Thanks, Pete.
Drive him to all his official engagements, and I love the job, and he's a good guy to drive round.
Drop punt by McKenna. The goal umpire doesn't move much. It's there.
Now let's talk about Collingwood, Peter. You were such a star for the Collingwood Football Club back in the day. What's your biggest highlight from playing footy?
Well, my biggest highlight, I think, is really a low light as well. You know, it was my only grand final, 1970. It's a record crowd, 121,000 people. We were 44 points in front at half-time in a grand final against Carlton and lost. But actually to play in a grand final in front of 121,000 was a highlight.
Do you have any of your teammates nowadays that you still catch up with?
Oh, I go to a lot of Collingwood functions, and Barry Price, who was a great teammate of mine, and Lou Richards said I used to sleep with him every night and cuddle him and make sure he got into bed because he'd kick it to me all the time in matches, but it wasn't true, by the way.
And what was your most embarrassing moment in football?
Well, I hate to own up to this because I had a reputation, Layla, of being a very, very good straight kick. We played Hawthorn one day at Victoria Park and I kicked 1 goal 10.
Kick goes towards full forward. Over the back, McKenna.
Now, does Peter ever pump up his own tyres and talk about his glory days back in the day?
Oh, look, does he? What? You know, it's amazing how the war stories get to be so much grander the longer you get from the war. Now, look, seriously, Pete was a champion in those days. I was a little bit younger than him, and I remember going to the football and cursing Macca whenever he'd take a mark in front of goal or within range, and you'd think, oh, he's an accurate kick, this is gone.
Well, thank you so much, Peter, for joining us on the Marngrook Footy Show. I'll let you get back to work.
My pleasure, Layla.
Morning, Pete.
Morning, Bruce.
Oh, got to get off. We're in a bit of a hurry now, tight spot. Have you got my documents for today?
I certainly have.
Oh, Peter!
We're going to go out and about and with Shelley and Lana, and they talked to some fans out at the MCG about their famous moments in the 70s.
Treks, you?
When you think of 1970s football, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Carlton, Collingwood, 1970. I just met my to-be wife.
Carlton beating Collingwood in the 79 grand final. Full stop.
This is 1973-74, back-to-back premierships. Pretty sure Kevin Bartlett tore it up. Guys in beards, not really professional, running around, dirty.
In the 70s, I remember Jeff Southby at halftime having a smoke and having a drink.
Who was your favourite 70s player?
Jezza, let go, you beauty! Oh, Jezza and Nichols, come on.
Serge Stefani, was he around the 70s or was he before that?
And how do you compare the footy in the 1970s to today?
Bit softer.
Bit soft?
In the olden days, you can throw a punch, the umpire wouldn't penalise them.
Game's a lot quicker, obviously, these days, but you can never get sick of football, could you? You know, I don't. Nah.
I don't.